there is a bridge, but the bridge is just big enough for a small car, but not for buses. What do you think? Who are the people who can cross the bridge? And who are the people who cannot cross the bridge? Outside in the architecture, which he compares then with the code, the software programs out there, they have a lot of influence on what we can do or what we cannot do. When you have a chat system, and in this chat, you can generate groups of 20 people. But you cannot generate larger groups than 20 people. The only people that can generate larger groups would then be the company itself. Normally, in a democracy, you are allowed to join. You are freedom of assembly. If you cannot influence the software there, it will be very difficult for you to coordinate anything with 21 people.
Welcome everybody to Techlore Talks. Today I'm super thrilled to invite Matthias Kirschner from the Free Software Foundation of Europe on for an amazing discussion about free and open source software in Europe, but also just broadly what the movement is about, why it's so important, what Matthias is doing and what he has done throughout his life, and most importantly, just fresh perspectives on software and the artificial boundaries that it can place on our lives and why open source is important even if we don't use it and how it influences proprietary software. We can't do these interviews without some amazing people like Tutanota, who sponsors us, and also all of our patrons who allow us to do all this content for free. So thank you to everybody who is supporting us. Definitely check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Techlore if you want to see more interviews like this. And without further ado, let me cut over to Matthias and enjoy what you hear because it's some good stuff.
I'm Matthias. I work for the Free Software Foundation Europe. Got involved in free software in the late 1990s, and it got involved in the FSFE as first intern in 2004, volunteered for several years, and since 2009, I'm working full-time for the Free Software Foundation Europe.
Got it. So I actually was introduced to you from Jos from Nextcloud. He said that you're someone I would probably enjoy talking to, and so I'm really appreciative of him, I guess, putting us in contact. And embarrassingly enough, perhaps because I'm US-based, I've only heard of the FSF, not the FSFE. So do you mind expanding on what the FSFE is, and is there a connection? Are you guys in formal collaboration with the FSF, or is it just similar? Do you mind kind of expanding into that?
So the FSF was founded in 1985 as a legal body for the GNU project with the aim to develop a free operating system where all components of the operating system grant users the rights to use, understand, share, and improve the software. And then in 2001, the FSFE was created in Europe. The idea was that there is not just one free software foundation out there, but there are several free software foundations around the world. So you have a network of independent organizations, so personal and financial independent, and that if anything happens to one of the organizations, the others will still operate and work for software freedom. And that's what was then started, that in 2001, the FSFE was founded. And from there on, we started to work for free software in Europe, mainly in the areas of like public awareness work, of policy work, and legal work for free software.
That makes sense. So do you, just to give me a better understanding here, do you tackle the same issues in different geographic regions, or do you deal with geographic specific issues via your own networks? Is there any collaboration at all, or are you guys doing your own thing with similar philosophies?
So there is both. I mean, in the history, there were things that the two organizations worked more together on, for example, when it's about the work against software patents, that was something where there was a lot of collaboration there, or when it was about updating licenses, where we were then also involved when the FSF worked on the GNU GPL version 3. But beside that, there are also lots of projects and activities that are different in the different areas. So in Europe, we did a lot of campaigning, which was also from the campaigns with a little bit different focus than US campaigns. I mean, I think that also changed over the years, but at the beginning, I would say that negative campaigning was way more common in the US, in the IT area there, than it was common in Europe. So our campaigns, they were more focused on like positive messaging than negative messaging.
What would be like a negative campaign message?
A negative message would be like, for example, no DRM, IBAT, or there would be something like we don't want this as a campaign, like no DRM. And in Europe, we try to focus more on the positive messaging part there. For example, we organized in this area the Document Freedom Day. And there we highlighted organizations that are using open standards where you don't have any DRM, but where everyone can access that with other software. The formats received there. For example, we rewarded a public radio station that was broadcasting and publishing their shows in Ogg Vorbis at that time already. And so people didn't have to use patented MP3 software to listen to the radio. Or there was also for a public television station which published their videos in Ogg Theora as a video format, or for example, formats for newspaper publications, so that you don't need to get an app to read your newspaper, but they also provide it in TXT, HTML, EPUB, and so on.
That's awesome. I like the difference in messaging, and I guess this isn't an assumption I should make. I feel that the free software movement is stronger in the EU than it is in the US, from what I've been able to tell, mainly because I've seen governments actually implement a lot of open source solutions. We see governments use Matrix. We see governments, I don't know about governments, but I've seen school districts use LibreOffice and things of this nature. And I haven't seen any of that in the US. Would you attribute that to your different approach? Would you attribute that to a different geographical reason? When I was in Berlin, I just went into a vegan restaurant, and they had a little flyer there with all the vegan spots in Berlin. And just by pure coincidence, I think the whole app was open source. And I want to say it was available on F-Droid. I don't know for sure.
Yes, I know the developer. It's Berlin Vegan Maps.
Yes.
Yeah,
and so
that's a great project. Yes.
You just stumble on this stuff. You don't stumble on this as someone who lives in the States.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit difficult for me to answer the question because I'm not so familiar with the exact situation in the US, but I think there are a few factors there. First of all, in Europe, we are not that restricted as a nonprofit to also directly talk with politicians and political decision makers. Whereas in the US, I mean, there are some restrictions on different nonprofit entities that they cannot directly engage in political work there. And the FSFE, on the other hand, from the very beginning on, we reached out to politicians. We talked with them about free software. And I mean, that was when I started in the early 2000s. You reached out to politicians that you would like to talk with them about free software and the effects of software on our society and on the economy. They looked at you and thought, like, what a nerd. What does this guy with those long hair, what does he want? And maybe they told you to talk with their IT guy or something like this. But I mean, the good thing was that over the years, the more people reached out to politicians about those topics, the more of them also thought, okay, what is this about? And they might have asked one of their employees to check what this is about and started talking with you on those topics. And that's something which I see that in Europe, there was the FSFE, there were other organizations and other European countries doing this work on a on a level of the different countries there, and people engaged with politicians, and they engaged with political decision makers and with public administrations and talked with them about free software. And I think it was something where a lot of them, they didn't say like, you have to use this, the other thing is bad, but it was more in a way to make sure that they get a better understanding of what are the advantages of this, also get an assessment of how difficult it is to make changes there, but that in the end political decision makers can take a decision based on facts than on some hearsay. So there are often, I mean, there were also many campaigns by companies who were not so much in favor of free software at that time, at least, who told people all kind of strange stories about like, if you use free software, you need to publish everything you have to the public, and all your software, all your data, or other things like if you switch to free software, so many people will get unemployed because you cannot make any money with free software, and this is communism. And so they also portrayed a lot of like free software advocates as like those software hippie communists, and that was something which over the years then those perception changed, and they understood that, well, there are people out there, they don't want to just like push them and tell them, I am screaming louder for this solution here, so you have to go in this direction. But there were lots of people in Europe who engaged in discussions, who helped people to get a better understanding, to enable them to take a better decision on their own. And I think that was something where there were a lot of compromises and a lot of steps into the right direction, but they were not perfect at the time. But still, you applauded them for taking the first steps. You helped them to take the next steps afterwards. And I think that's how, at least in Europe, you need to approach this, that you need to find compromises. You need to do it step by step. You cannot make the okay, we are not a majority, we are louder, let's switch everything to free software. So
right. Well, this actually brings up a lot of things that I might want to touch on, because a very common sentiment that I see about free software, especially on the internet, though everything's charged on the internet, so I don't know how representative that is of people who actually use free software, who aren't online all day. But it feels very extremist a lot of times. It's this is not free software, therefore like nobody should use it, and this is how things should be. This is why, like, this has one proprietary thing in it, therefore I will never use it. And so there's a lot of this sentiment out there. And what you described sounded a little bit different from that. It sounded like you just wanted to educate people on the benefits of free software and how maybe some people could benefit from that. Is that perhaps a better way of outlining how you approach things?
I mean, that's our general approach. That doesn't mean that we also sometimes we get loud. We ask questions they would like to prefer not to answer, or we raise issues in a forum where they wouldn't like these issues to be raised. That of course also happens, but I think that's the reality of how change works. And the other part, I have the impression that this is also what some platforms want us to believe how the world looks like, that there are those extremes. And I mean, I'm now involved in the free software community since the late 1990s, and my impression is that those people, they are really a small minority in there who are who don't understand that people sometimes have to make compromises, that in your daily lives it's very, very difficult. If you say like, you should not use any proprietary software, I mean, how do you want to do that? There are so many technologies which you cannot use at all if you go down through all the levels in your computers. And what do you want to do? You're not using the elevator anymore. You don't want to take a train or a plane, or I mean, with mobile phones, if you go down to like GSM chips or something like that, it's difficult. And I mean, when I talk with people and they tell me, oh yes, I put another Android ROM on my phone, but I then used Aurora to install the app from my bank because else I cannot access that anymore in my country. I mean, if you then tell them, oh, that's bad, I think that's the wrong approach. The right approach is like, it's great that you installed a free Android ROM on your phone. You got rid of a lot of proprietary software there, and yeah, the situation with the bank, that's really bad, and we should work hard to make the banks understand that they are just offering those sometimes really simple apps in a way that you cannot understand what they are actually doing on your phone, and then you need to have an app for each of those banks. Also, the only thing they do is they generate a second factor where we have lots of standards that can do that, and you have better software already on your phone generating a second factor, maybe even with a hardware token. So yeah, that's a thing we should approach, and we should talk with the banks. We should talk with regulators that we change the situation there. But it's not the individual person who is then to blame for that they cannot resist this one piece of software on their mobile phone.
Right. I definitely appreciate that approach, and I think you're right too, in the sense that platforms online do a very good job of presenting extreme opinions and making it. Maybe it's not even the platforms, but it's very hard when you're through a computer screen to be able to tell how prominent a opinion or take really is. There's not, I mean, you can look at likes and favorites as kind of a judgment of that, but even that, they're cookie points. They don't mean anything. So
but
it's a tough situation.
Even if you go back to the time before, you had those platforms which worked a lot like with likes and shares and how much attention do you get and how much advertisement can you sell. Even at that time, I mean, some journalists they want to rather focus on the extreme cases and the outstanding situations, and not the, oh yeah, it's complicated parts of how of stories. It's more like there is this person, a crusader for this cause, or there are those people who rich person fights poor person, or I mean, it's a little bit like stories. Humans like those stories, they like heroes, but reality is often more complicated, and a lot of heroes, they wouldn't exist if there aren't like hundreds of people who do a lot of work whom people might not recognize that they are involved at all. So
Right. Well, to pivot a little bit, so you posted that recently on your website that it's the 40th anniversary for the GNU project. When were you all? You were established in '99, right?
we were established in 2001.
Okay.
And the FSF in 1985, and the GNU project in 1983. That's why we have 40 years of the GNU project.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you for clearing that up for me. So what has been kind of like your main highlights of your career so far? What are the things that you would highlight as your biggest wins? What are things you still want to do? And I think from there, we'll probably touch on more of the broad free software discussion, maybe for people who are newer to free software.
From the things that the FSFE has worked on, there is one campaign framework which I think is very well known. Meanwhile, it is called Public Money, Public Code, where on the website publiccode.eu we summarized arguments in favor of that if public money is used to create software, that software should be under a free software license so that everyone benefits from it. The idea about that is that public administration should be able to work together, reuse ideas, better collaborate with each other, provide better services for citizens, and in general, the idea, let's not waste those good resources we have and scarce resources, which are like good programmers, and let them fix the problem again and again and again. That's the same problem, but let's make sure that we can work together and can concentrate on fixing the next problem, because one problem is already solved. So let's share the solution for that. And yeah, we were preparing this website with arguments, added a video there, translated it into many languages. We did a brochure with additional information for decision makers when they are interested in this topic, and provided all this information plus other help to other organizations out there who want to promote this and who want to get in contact with their political decision makers. And that's meanwhile, from my perspective, one of the most successful digital campaigns out there. You go to a conference, people mention this. I haven't heard about them before, but they are using our campaign materials and our arguments, which, yeah, I take as a success.
Has any country or location actually implemented these?
There are several. I mean, first there are some public administrations who also signed this letter of us that this should be the way how it is, how it should be. So you can find that on publicco.eu when you filter the supporting organizations there for public administrations. And meanwhile, there are also several political parties or mentions in party programs out there that ask for this. So there is, for example, in Italy, there was already for a longer time regulation that if you procure new software, you should first check if there is other software that solves this problem used by other public administrations, so you can reuse that. Is there free software out there that solves the problem? And just if those two things are not given, then you are allowed to procure other software. So that's on the level there. If you go into implementation, you will see that, I mean, as always, the problem is in implementing a lot of those laws or implementing decisions. So you will find that people often find some loopholes not to implement certain decisions there. But like in Germany, we have seen that in several of the federal states there, that in the party programs, in the election programs, they ask for this on the federal level. It was also included there in the past. Even, I mean, it's meanwhile also that there are meanwhile also more conservative parties that implemented that. So also, as one example now from Germany, there is a German CDU, which is the conservative party here, and they also had a party resolution asking for this, and which was approved there. But then when you go into like other countries, you have like the city of Barcelona implementing or working on this topic. You have public administrations in France working for this and making sure to create more free software and publish more free software. You have that in Scandinavia, in countries there from different institutions. So there's a lot out there. You can check out some examples in our brochure from which is available on publicco.eu. But also if you start looking for those examples, there are meanwhile a lot of them, and this is really showing that in the different European countries there are more and more people who understand this. What benefits do you get from free software? And I think a lot of them also meanwhile understand the democratic aspect of this as well.
Right. It sounds like a very successful campaign, and it's something that I'm very Jealous of, mainly because I haven't seen this kind of movement in the US. Here, what I see when I cover the news, aside from the collaborative benefits that you shared about open source software, the other thing for me is the transparency that comes along with it, which is important when you're talking about public money. If you have a ton of people contributing money to something, and here it might be a police program that's using facial recognition on citizens, and we don't know how that's being used. We don't know what the software does. We don't know how it works. And we pretty much just have to study the results of the program. That's why we're seeing, I'm sure you've seen the research papers of biased facial recognition or things of that nature. We just have to analyze the end result. We can't actually look at the code and make improvements despite it coming from taxpayer money.
I mean, on the other hand, I mean, I'm not an expert in for free software in the US, but there are also for some time, even before in Europe, it started at much. We had some publications and very good documentation from like the Department of Defense in the US about free software and pros and cons there. And I think there were also several department agencies that published also software under free software licenses before. So I think it's also out there.
Got it.
Just that I don't have such a good overview there. So, but I'm pretty sure if you search there, you will also find that. Maybe it is also that sometimes the question is also how much do people talk about that, and that was also something that we have seen in the past, that there were times when public administrations, they didn't want to talk about their use or their work in free software. That was something especially around the time when there was a lot of attention to the situation in Munich with the Linux project at that time, where they used free software there, but there was a lot of lobby work against this by large companies that were not interested that this should get the default there. And afterwards, for many years, when I talked with people, they told me all kind of great stuff they were doing, but told me, please don't tell anyone, and especially don't tell journalists about this, because if this is known out there, there will be lobbyists coming and it will be destroyed. And so that's something that a lot of them, they choose not to promote it too much. They just wanted to do it. And I think that that's still often the case, that there are people out there, they are doing great work. It's published as free software. They are using free software, but they don't want this to get too much known, because then they know that their boss or their boss's boss or their boss's boss's boss will be approached, and then there will be those discussions about impacts on like economy, or we have so many people here, we pay that much. Okay, they often don't use the tax argument, because of a lot of them, they don't pay taxes, but it will become problematic then. So they can't just do it anymore. It becomes then a political topic, and then they have to defend that and cannot concentrate on their work anymore.
So would you say that one of, if not the biggest friction point to wider adoption of open source software is companies who rely on proprietary software, or is there something else? Because that's something that you touched on a lot in this interview.
No, I think there are different factors there. I mean, one is that free software, I think, is still not widely understood as what it is actually about. So, I mean, for a very long time, people thought, okay, you can get some creative software there. It's something for those hackers, or but I mean, the main point there is, and that's also why it's getting more traction meanwhile, is when you are in a democracy, you distribute power. You make sure that there is not a single point where a lot of power is concentrated. And you do that with, like, you have adjudicative, an executive, a legislative. You have different states. You have different institutions which do some like checks and balances. But when we look at software or technology, you have a lot of power in some places, very few hands. And for a very long time, people didn't realize the impact of that on society. But I think that's something that is changing now. You see that a field which wasn't regulated at all for a very long time, or very little regulation, where decision makers now go into those topics and think about, okay, how do we regulate this? How can we make sure that those companies or those organizations aren't getting too powerful? And yes, those companies, of course, they make a lot of money with those monopolies, and they can use this money to protect those monopolies. And every year, they can protect this. That's a lot of money for the company, for the people involved there, and for their shareholders. So that's something which they try to prevent, of course. But on the other hand, it's also that there were a lot of people in the positions to take decisions who didn't understand these topics that much, and for whom it was still a bit, what is this about? And now you see that there are more and more younger people getting in those positions who have an understanding about those topics and who get that faster what we are talking about, and where I think there will be a lot of change there because of that as well.
Perfect. So you think it's also educational, and that's something that you're continually working on by just your presence existing and all the resources that you have, which is going to help that issue. Do you mind expanding a little bit on the power? Let's say someone's listening to this for the first time, and they're, maybe they're watching this from YouTube, logged into their Google account, or maybe they also have Facebook. I don't think it's necessarily wrong that people have these accounts. It sounds like you care more about the companies rather than people using the companies. Don't want to speak for you, but I think that's probably the bigger issue here. But what does this power mean? Why should someone be concerned about this? Because, as you know, it's hard to tell what that power looks like when you're just using a service. But what is the issue with the power that you're putting in the hands of these companies? What are they doing? What's the problem?
So, I mean, there is this very famous book by Lawrence Lessig, Code and Other Laws of Cyberspace, which was one of the most influential books for me. And in this book, he explains how people are regulated. He explains how markets work. He explains how laws work. He explains how social norms work in our society, how they have an impact on your daily lives. Now, code or the software infrastructure technology, he sees as a very strong regulator in our lives. So, like if we go into the real world, like technology there, think about the difference. You want to go on another side of the river, and there's a bridge, or there isn't a bridge. And now there is a bridge, but the bridge is just big enough for a small car, but not for buses. What do you think? Who are the people who can cross the bridge? And who are the people who cannot cross the bridge? So people who have a car, they can cross the bridge. Those who need to take a bus because they cannot afford a car, they cannot cross the bridge. So I mean, that's now in the, like when I look outside in the like architecture, which he compares then with the code, the software programs out there. And the software programs, those are the components which build this infrastructure, this digital infrastructure we have. And they have a lot of influence on what we can do or what we cannot do. For example, that was also one nice example from the very old times now. Think about when you have a chat system. And in this chat, you can generate groups of 20 people, but you cannot generate larger groups than 20 people. the only people that can generate larger groups would then be the company itself. So they can decide to build a larger group and have more people talking with each other. But you cannot decide to have 21 people in one group. That was something that AOL prevented at the time in their old messenger system before we had those others out there. So they have a lot of influence. How many people can get together? Normally, in a democracy, you are allowed to join. You are freedom of assembly. You can join together, and there is no rule like it's 20 people, and if you're 21, well, you have to separate in two groups. That's you don't have this there. But this infrastructure, it doesn't allow you to have more people in a room than the 20 people. So if you cannot influence the software there, it will be very difficult for you to coordinate anything with 21 people. So and that's something which in many places this has an effect on you. Like I don't know, have you still used DVDs?
I do not, but I did. I'm old enough to have used DVDs, so I did grow up on them.
Yeah. So, for example, when you cannot, a software tells you are not allowed to copy a DVD, you cannot copy the DVD. Also, I mean, a computer is designed to make copies of data. So, even so, the law in some countries might allow you to copy a DVD. The software doesn't allow you to exercise the rights which you would have.
So is what you're trying to say in this segment that there are artificial boundaries that are put in place from these organizations?
It's not just artificial boundaries. I mean, yeah, often they put boundaries in place because of conscious decision. Sometimes programmers just put boundaries in place because they haven't thought about other use cases of their software. So they create something, and within their cultural background, they grow up in Europe. They have been influenced by culture there, by the laws there, and then they are programming something. And they might not want to do something against the law, but also they might be influenced by some social norms, so they program something. Now, when someone in a country in Asia gets this software, they might think like, oh, why do I have to do it this way? But I would like to do this, and then they cannot change the software if it's not free software, and they also can't understand what rules are implemented there even. So it might just not work for them because they are used to do things differently. And so in a lot of cases, as a programmer, you will transform your belief system and the rules you are used to the people that are using the software afterwards. If you don't allow them to understand what rules are implemented there by providing others the source code, and if you don't allow them to make modifications to this so they can change that and adapt it to their own needs, you are exercising power on them.
Right. That's such a cool perspective. I really enjoy that because I think a lot of people just think there's only one way to program something. If you're making a Twitter alternative, there's a way to make it and it's just code and there's no human behind that. There's no bias, there's no influence, there's no possible diversity in how that code is developed and who it's targeted for and how it works and what's going on behind the scenes. So it's a very human way of looking at code, which I don't think many people have. I think many people associate programmers as an extension of the computer rather than humans developing code.
But on the other hand, I mean, I think for many years people were also trained that if something doesn't work on your computer, it's your fault, right? So, and was also as something like a little bit. There are those people who understand computers and they do this, and well, you are the ones who you then get it, and if it doesn't work, it's your fault. While those programs, the whole infrastructure around us, all the components in the internet, they have been created by humans, and humans do mistakes, and humans have a bias, and humans have certain beliefs they will transfer, they will which will have an effect on all their aspects of their life. And well, if you know that something is created by other humans and that humans make mistakes, and that you can also have a look at that, and or if you can't, someone else can, and you can have a discussion if those things are right or wrong, and if they are consistent with other laws or social norms in your society. That's a completely different perspective. But of course, for a lot of companies who are in like monopoly situations, this is also beneficial that this is something there's a software and it's there and you cannot change it. That's the way it is. And you have to behave the way that the software wants and not change software the way you want it to behave.
Right. Actually, I think it's hard for people to conceptualize what this might look like. To give a personal example, and ironically, I will be using an open source software as the example, not because I'm against the software. I'm going to use Signal as the example, just teaser. I love Signal. It's what I use almost exclusively with everybody I know. But Signal does have some frustrating limitations. For example, you can't use Signal on 2 mobile phones because there always has to be one core device. You can't do 2 linked devices. For context, WhatsApp recently released a feature where you can have WhatsApp on 2 phones. I personally would like to see the option on Signal for any device to be a linked device, regardless if it's a phone, which they've done on the iPad. Like on the iPad, you can select whether or not it's a linked device or if it's the core device. And it's frustrating because this one limitation dictates what devices I can buy, how I use Signal, how many Signal accounts I can have, and all these other things. Now, someone could fork Signal and host Signal, and it's open source, so someone, in theory, could build the infrastructure. It would be an immense task just to fix one small issue, but it's theoretically possible. Now, if Signal wasn't open source, and by the way, this is done because people like Session and other messengers actually forked the Signal protocol, and they have kind of done this on their own. So it's already kind of happened as well. And I don't think SimpleX is based on, I don't want to speak on SimpleX because I'm not too familiar with it. But if it's proprietary, you just have 0 options. If it's proprietary, but like this is what a limitation looks like. It's something that prevents you from using a device a certain way. It impacts your day-to-day life. And if you have 50 different proprietary bits of software in your life and they all have these limitations, you might actually be a lot more influenced by the software than you think. I wanted to share that along because this is a recent realization from my end, which is software limitation that I use day to day actually dramatically changes the way I live my life without me realizing it.
And I mean, with Signal, you also see that it is actually quite. There are nuances in this. So Signal, the client is free software. The server, from my understanding, as well, but I also don't know that many people that are running their own servers, and they will not federate with the main server. So you have a single point of failure, and I can understand that. I mean, this gives you the possibility for like Signal to have faster changes there, so you don't have to coordinate that with other people doing like clients that access the Signal network, and where you might have other features included there. But it's also something that is, of course, limiting than the or they still have more power over this communication than, for example, if you take XMPP as a protocol, and you have several XMPP servers, you have tons of XMPP chat clients, and on different platforms with different features. And it's very easy for someone to just set up an XMPP server. I mean, I did that in 2004 while I was an intern. It was quite easy. You set it up and it works. And but yeah, that's then something where people have like, they can choose more. People have to coordinate more on the standardization there. But yeah, it of course it has an impact if like at the moment there is one entity And if the Signal server is shut down, we will not be able to use Signal anymore to text with each other or to have calls with each other. While it's very, very hard to shut off XMPP conversations, because that's many servers all on an equal level that are federating with each other. Way more difficult to shut that off. So
Right. I guess to kind of pivot over, just broadly, if someone's listening to this, maybe they've heard of free software. I feel like in this day and age, most people have heard of the term open source, at least, maybe even if it's just hearing the word. Let's say someone's listening to this, they don't quite understand open source software yet. I should say free software, not open source software. So they don't understand free software and they want to get involved. What are kind of the first steps that you would suggest to someone who's looking to get more involved in this, maybe to learn more about it, but not just to learn about it, but also to be more of a part of it? Do you think that it's more social, like they should get socially involved? Do you think it's you should switch from proprietary software to free software? What would you suggest to someone who's listening and wants to get more involved?
I mean, that depends so much on that person. I would say for me, a good first step is to understand what free software actually is. And that free software, or other people call it open source software, that it is software which doesn't discriminate. So it gives you the right to use the software for any purpose and gives everyone the right to use the software for any purpose. The other part, that when it's free software, it should grant you the right to understand the software. For that, you need to get the source code, and then you can start to analyze what this software is actually doing. Or if you don't want to look at the source code, you know that other people can do, and that they could speak up when they see something in there which is bad for society or bad for you as an individual because of privacy reasons. And they might then help you to get to remove this components there. And that free software gives you the right to, beside the right to use it for any purpose and to understand it, to share it with others. So if you solve the problem, you can make sure to share it with others, and then they can also use the solution again, and the other way around as well. And as the last right there, that you are allowed to make modifications to improve the software, so that you don't have to do what the software programmer, the initial programmer, thought about, but that you are allowed to make modifications there to adapt it to your own needs as an individual, as an organization, as a public administration. Of course, that could also mean that you might have to pay for some of those things if you want to get modifications, or if someone is sharing that, they can also ask you to that you have to pay for that. So if you have this basic understanding and this understanding that this is something which is, it's not so much about technology itself, it's more on the level of, we have the freedom of the press in our society, we have freedom of assembly, and well, if you want to distribute power, it's also about distributing power over software as one part of technology, so we need software freedom there as well. And if you think about that, I think that's already a huge step you're taking. And then it completely depends on your interests, how you want to get involved. Maybe you say, oh, that sounds all reasonable, but well, I just bought this iPhone, and what do I do now? Well, then we have a look if maybe there are some programs out there you can use, like you can use, as you said, like a messenger, a free software messenger instead of a proprietary one. If you have an Android phone, you might want to install F-Droid, which is a free software app store. Very easy to get that on your phone, and from there on you can explore other apps there that are also all free software, granting you those 4 rights. And then you can explore what is out there. And if you say, well, I'm a programmer, I would like to get involved, then, well, there are so many people out there who would love to get you involved. And if you say, oh, I can't program, but I am very good with like UX design, or I'm very good in in writing documentation or explaining people how to use software, or doing videos about how to use software, or translating software in other languages so that people who don't speak English can also use the software. I mean, there are so many things out there, and I think, yeah, you don't need to invest lots and lots of time. Often it's a very small thing you can do to already become part of this movement. And if you say, well, I don't have any time for anything of that, but it sounds good, well, there are several organizations out there, including the FSFE, who would be which would be happy to receive a donation, and they can continue this work. And other companies out there, when you pay them for the software, they can improve this further, and can make sure that even if you cannot use it now, maybe in a few years you have better alternatives out there, and you don't just depend on some proprietary software that is very dominant because of their monopoly positions.
Well, that's one hell of a call to action. I'm sure what you said resonates. Some bit of what you said resonates differently with different people, is what I'm hoping, because that was a very whole answer. So
yeah, I mean, I just think I don't want to tell, like, do this or do that. I think it's depending a lot on the interest. And I mean, I can tell you, like, this morning I was doing a reading of a story tale I wrote about free software at a school with 100 children from around 8 years onwards. And yeah, I mean, they then afterwards say, like, I would like to start programming. Then you can guide them in this way. And there are others who they are interested in other topics around this. And yeah, I think it depends so much on the individual there that you cannot just say, like, it's this one thing you should do.
100%. And we deal with this issue too, on the privacy side of things, because we do predominantly talk about privacy and security, but as well as open source occasionally. And it's the same thing. We're gonna say, hey, there's like 5 different messenger options that we generally recommend to a lot of people, and then of course people go, well, which one do I do? And it's like, I don't know. It depends. Like, do you want decentralization, as you were referring to earlier? Do you want something centralized? Do you want something easier to use with your friends and family? Do you need something that's entirely, like, I guess, free and open source? Or is it okay if something's based on an open source protocol? What kind of security features do you need? Do you need disappearing messages? Like, there's just so much nuance to it. Is there an issue that there's a unique identifier attached to you? Like, Signal requires your phone number. Are you okay sharing your phone number with people? Some people are, some people aren't. So it's extremely nuanced. And I'm sure, as you're alluding to, free software is the same way.
And I think, I mean, there's also, that's one of the differences there. Like, as a company, you need to do, like, there's one option you need in this email, like, do this, sign up here, because you need this conversion. While on the other hand, I mean, our mission is to educate people that they can take their own decisions and that they get a better understanding what would be best for them. And yes, that's not as easy as just click here, pay here, do that. But I mean, that's also not the kind of society we envision. We want people to think about a little bit more what is good for them and where they want to go. And they might even come to the conclusion that, well, the other things that we are offering or telling them, that this is not a way they want to go. And that's also fine. It's the end. We want to help people to get a better understanding, and also then see points which we might miss. And I think that's way better than to educate people to just do what other people tell you to do, even if those are might at that point be the ones that tell you, like, install this for your privacy. It's better to get a little bit better understanding there. If it's then a friend of you, I think that's always then a difference there. If friends are telling, yeah, well, there are those, but I would recommend you this because of whatever. I mean, I also take a lot of recommendation from friends or from other people whom I value. But beside that, I think, think a little bit more on what you want.
Right. And I mean, I'll throw myself under the bus here because, so people are always curious what I use. And I can't share everything I use for like OPSEC reasons. But to simplify this for work, like right now, I'm using Mac OS to do this video call. In fact, that's what I use for all my video production because I have not found quite the equivalent experience, to simplify this, for the video production and the creative side of things in the open source world. But for my personal life and everything that happens through myself, I've found I actually prefer the free software over the proprietary software. I prefer using Linux as my main operating system than anything else. It gives me control to do whatever I want with it. I like using messengers that are extremely freedom respecting. I like using browsers that are also that way too. So in my personal life, it actually aligns very well, but I struggle with it a little bit more on the creative production side of things. And I feel like it's a common complaint because a lot of professional tools, I don't think the free software movement has caught up quite to be able to give like an AutoCAD alternative or something like that. And so I think they do exist, but you're going to hear professionals debate, I guess, whether or not they want to use them. And so I guess that's part of me and my journey of trying to navigate like where in my life I want to integrate free software, where I don't want to integrate it, and how I'm constantly pushing towards it, but I'm not perfect either. And I don't think any of us are perfect.
I mean, that's like there are so many areas which were difficult to handle the task there with free software in the past, and I mean, you often need to look at like how are the business models there? How is the money stream there? If more people spend a lot of money on the proprietary solutions than on free software solutions, then of course those companies, they have a big advantage. If you have the budget of 1 million versus 1,000 euros per year, you have to work a lot like in your free time to catch up and to implement features there. While on the other hand, if more people try to balance that and spend the similar amount of money they spend on proprietary software also on free software, then of course you can catch up there. And I mean, I would say that several years ago, people like in the creative, I'll now stay in the creative area, people wouldn't have thought that Blender would be in the situation where it's now, that you can use free software solution for 3D animation on a very high level.
Blender is impressive.
So, and that's also for other tooling. And yes, I mean, free software is mainly dominant when you look at like operating system. Try to use another operating system on a supercomputer nowadays. If you want to develop software yourself, even if you develop proprietary software, I'm pretty sure most of the tools you will use are free software out there. Most of the languages you will use are free software out there, compilers, editors, whatsoever. And still, I mean, if you nowadays, when I had a first mobile phone out there, I didn't imagine that nowadays you can run a mobile phone with a lot of free software on it, on your daily life. You have like, you can make phone calls where the other person actually understands you with free software. You have maps there, you have messengers there. People around you pop up without you telling them about those messengers, and they tell you they also now have the same free software messenger. And yeah, so it often depends on the areas there where it's where you have free software in the dominant position, or where you have free software still needing to catch up, and people who need to invest there, that they are actually free software solutions.
Right. It's a good perspective because I used free DaVinci Resolve for a long time, but eventually I did pay for Studio because I liked it so much. But I didn't think of the financial perspective there. Like we as a company do contribute to some open source projects, but it would make sense to also try to offset the purchase for the proprietary software for the open source, for whatever. I guess it's tough though, because there's like I'd say there's like 2 or 3. There's Kdenlive, there's OpenShot, and then some people do edit videos in Blender, but it's not normally associated as an NLE. But either way, like, that's where it gets messy. Like, do I contribute to all
Yes.
three equally? Do I pick one? It's
Yeah. I mean,
interesting.
that's in the end also a strategic decision for your company then. But I mean, think about like also in the like graphic area about the improvements that we have seen over the last years, like with Inkscape, with Krita, with
Krita's
GIMP,
amazing.
with Scribus, and so on. I mean, you can meanwhile you can create a professional book with free software, and that's something which was also quite difficult before, like in the printing area. And I mean, I know companies that that have policies when they do projects themselves and they reuse free software components there, that they have something like 10% of their of the money they make with this project, they afterwards distribute to those components involved. I know people who think about, okay, if I now spend 10,000 euro on a proprietary solution, maybe I should spend 1% and give that now to a free software project out there or company developing free software, because in the long run, it will be cheaper for me, even if I stay with the proprietary solution, because they know that they cannot increase so much the price for this, because there is a competitor, even if it's not like on the same feature level there. For example, I think all those people out there using Microsoft Office, they have benefited a lot of the work of the people from LibreOffice, even if they never used LibreOffice, because Microsoft knew that if they increase the amount of money they ask for too much, then people might consider to use LibreOffice instead. And that's for other software out there as well. If there are competitors, well, that's a good thing for for you, even if you in the end then decide to use the proprietary software.
Very cool perspective. I haven't thought of that before. It's a good point too. It's just I like that. Do you have any final words to share with people?
I would have one shameless advertisement.
Okay.
And that is I wrote a book about free software, and it's a story tale for like 6 years, 106 years. Let me can show it to you. This is the book. It's an illustrated book, and it's called Ada and Sangeman: A Tale of Software, Skateboards, and Raspberry Ice Cream, which also includes a lot of the aspects we just talked about, just in a story, in a tale form. So if you are interested in this and maybe want to get younger people interested in aspects of technology, encouraging them to tinker with technology, or if you want, if you say, well, free software, open source, that's cool, but my parents don't understand it, or my boss doesn't understand it, have a look at it. The book is also available under free license. It's under Creative Commons by share alike, like Wikimedia is. We also provide all the text files, graphic files, so you can remix the book if you don't like something there. You can read the book to others, showing the illustrations and so on. So this is since August now available worldwide in English. It's also available in other languages. But yeah, so that's one small thing there. Beside the general point, I also wanted to mention we as FSFE, we wouldn't be able to do our work if there wouldn't be so many people out there who are donating to support us. So thank you to those who are supporting us. If you want to support us, we are very happy about that. If you do that, we can continue our work. We can continue our independent work, and continue what we have started in 2001. And there are other organizations out there who are also working for this. Please look out what other organizations there are, and if you spend a lot of money on other like software, then maybe you can use one small part there and see whom you could give that, people who are doing amazing things in the area, and who make sure that you benefit from this, and that you get those rights to use, understand, share, and improve, and don't take those away from you.
Beautiful. I will get links from all of that from you after our call. So you can just text me the book, where to donate, and anything else you want to share, and I'll leave it down in the show notes. So anyone listening can go ahead and check those out. And where can people find you if they want to connect with you or follow you and the work you're doing?
So, I mean, there is FSFE.org is the website. And then we are meanwhile like mainly present on the Fediverse, so the federated social network. You can sign up for mailings from us. I myself, I'm also, not such a big social media person, but on our website you will find at what events I will be. So I love to connect with you in the real world. And beside that, I'm also on Mastodon, which is one of the federated networks. And so
Perfect.
happy
We're on
to see you
Mastodon
there.
too. So if you follow us, you can follow Matthias right now as well. Well, thank you so much for the interview. It was very insightful. I learned a lot, and I know that other people will get value from it too. So thank you.
Then I'm very happy about it. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Now, I really want to talk about Matthias's new book. It's called A Tale of Software, Skateboards, and Raspberry Ice Cream. And I'm sure, adults can definitely read this, myself included, but it's definitely aimed more towards children. And it's a great way to expose people to the concepts of open source and the concepts of privacy, surveillance. And it's just a great book. And everything is under Creative Commons. There's a Git repository for this, and there's even book readings. And so if you really want a way to give back to privacy and security and open source, this is the best way to do it, especially now that's the holiday season. And so you can get active by gifting this book to somebody. If they have children, you can even buy the book and donate it to a local library. You can give feedback, you can write a review, and everything's under Creative Commons. So you could even translate the book into a different language. So this is just beautiful. And I really appreciate Matthias putting this together. And I really wanted to give a massive shout out to this because I just love the entire concept of it. And I'll leave links to everything down in the description. I would love to see some of you all purchase this and support the cause a little bit. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Matthias, for putting this together, and I hope that this resonates with other people because I think it's such a good way to advocate that I haven't quite seen before. And I also just want to thank Matthias and all of you and anyone else who's engaging with this via audio or video for your time and engaging with privacy, engaging with security, and engaging with open source in any way, shape, or form. I'm very appreciative that I'm just not talking into a void over this, and there are tons of people who care about this, and you're all awesome for tuning in, and I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And if you want to support what we're doing here, definitely check us out on patreon.com/Techlore. If you don't like Patreon, totally valid. We're also on LibrePay. We also support Ko-fi, and we also have Monero as well. So there are a ton of ways to support what we're doing, and I'll leave everything down in the description, as well as Matthias's stuff and the Free Software Foundation of Europe. And that is really it. I'll see you all next time on Techlore, and peace out.